Hey guys, it's Doa. You may think to yourself, hey, Doa's too nice to be on Thorin's channel. Why is he there? And you're right. He's locked me in his closet, and I'm being forced to record this. Help?
Right, I'm here for another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is going to be Pad, who is a coach at Team Vitality. Right, Pad, the place I actually want to start the interview is to give people an introduction. When I looked up, like the old classic, you go to the wiki and you look at all the things, and where were people? You actually seem like you've been in a million leagues. You've just done like the ERL tour. You were in like Portugal, and then like you've been everywhere, mate. You were in your native Denmark. Even like I wasn't even aware they had their own league, mate. So you've been everywhere, right? What would you say are what are the benefits you've learned from this? I'm guessing like maybe some cultural aspects or something. What's it actually been like to move around all these different scenes?
I think a big part of it has been learning to work with different sort of people, and especially people with different learning styles, because people from Portugal are obviously like very different from people from Denmark. And I think getting so much experience and working in different cultures with different people from different backgrounds, together with like being a teacher before I jumped into coaching, has like helped me be able to transfer knowledge like really efficiently across like multiple personality types. So I think that's probably the biggest benefit.
Was there actually like a specific goal for you when you first were in these scenes? Like, did you, for example, just think like, I'm just learning to coach? Did you already have a dream like to be an LEC coach? Did you want to coach the Danish team? What was the original vision?
So I always wanted to live off of esports. Like I knew that I'm 31, so I'm old enough for it to have been a meme back then when I initially started pursuing it, you know.
Right.
I met a lot of sort of like resistance from friends and near family, because esports was so new that it seemed like a bit of a joke at the time. But I knew this is what I wanted to do. I didn't quite know to what extent yet. But I think the further sort of I got into the process, the more I realized that I want all of it. Like I'm not going to be able to stop until I have a world championship. And while that currently seems a bit far away because of EU tendencies, like that's where we are now.
Right, obviously, one of the ways you came up, a lot of people don't know this. They think that it just goes like, it's like those football coaching trees. You know, you had like Alex Ferguson had this guy. So they think you're just under Mac, right? They don't actually realise you joined Mad Lions when Mad Lions basically had only been around for like 1 year or something. So how did you get picked up to Mad Lions? Like, how did you get scouted? Because as far as I know, they kind of scout the coach, they scout the players, right? They take you from lower league. So how did you get the gig?
I think getting scouted as a coach is really, really, really hard because like there's so little info on how coaches work, right? Like for example, I have no idea how Striker works as a coach for BDS because we don't have access to this. So honestly, the way that I got picked up was that I wrote to Duke and Peter Dunn and Mac because I watched a lot of Mad Lions and sort of the way that they play League of Legends really appealed to me. So I wrote all of them and I was like, hey, I'm feeling a bit stuck in terms of my development as a coach, if I could pay any of them to have a session with me. You
actually want to consult with them, right? You weren't applying for a gig, right? I see. Okay.
Yeah, I went to consult with them, and Mac helped me out a lot. He was like my main contact point, and sort of like through him helping me, he came to like me as a person and a coach, I guess. Because by the end of that year, when they were done with Worlds, they did a round of interviews for new coaches. And he asked if I wanted to do one, but basically just for fun. But then that interview went really well, and we did a game test, and that went well, and a personality test, and that went well, and I ended up getting the gig just from having written him on Twitter, like, I guess that's 3 years ago now.
One of the things I've found very interesting about knowing Peter Dunn and having on my shows for so many years is if people don't know, he has like a very unique approach to almost everything in life. Like one of the things I think a lot of people don't know is he has some like naive dream that he knows can't ever come true, that he would actually be like a real football coach in real life, guys. And he'd sort of be like, I don't know, like Man United coach, just be insane. Even though obviously that seems so implausible. But the reason I bring it up is because I actually feel like one thing that's cool about him is other people who are coaches are just basically experts about league. They're like a super high elo player who never made it as a pro, or they're friends with pros and they talk to them all the time. This guy seems more like his actual passion is coaching. Like, he seems to have a very interesting perspective. So what would you say in the sense, Pat? Because I've noticed it's not just you, obviously all the other people he's worked with. It seems like he's really good at not just being like, I'm the boss coach and you're my assistant. It's like he sort of empowers you to become a coach too.
I think so. Basically, I ended up never working with Mac, with Peter Dunn, but he was obviously together with Mac, and Mac has what you just touched on from Peter Dunn. Like Mac is that. Like Mac's passion is definitely also for League, but it's really for coaching. Like this guy could coach. Like, I'm sure, like, if League died tomorrow and he wanted to become a Valorant coach, he could do it over a very short period of time. And I think that's something that has helped my development so much, is that I've come into a team where, like, sometimes you have this odd dynamic between strategic coach and head coach of, like, when does the strategic coach move up? When does he take my job? Where Mac has sort of invited me to also develop as a head coach while being a strategic coach, because, like, he just loves coaching people. And I think that aspect of coaching has, like, broadened my love for it as well, that to the point where I don't really see myself do anything for the rest of my life outside of coaching. And I don't mind if it's League of Legends or football. I'm a massive Liverpool supporter, so anywhere I can coach and make people the absolute fucking best at what they do is what I'll do.
One thing I wanted to ask was, it also seems like, as you're saying, when they divide the labour up, they don't just literally make it like, right, well, one person has to have the term strategic coach, but I'm the head coach. Because I know some coaches, maybe it's silly fan adulation they want, but they all want to say that they're the one who did the Genius 200 IQ draft. You know, they never want to give that up and be like, oh no, he did that actually. It seems like, again, within the Peter Dunn / Mac system, they're very happy to, like, give credit and give people autonomy, right?
Yeah, and I think, like, having the ability to delegate well and share, like, not just the glories, but also the failures, right? Like, because basically that's what ends up happening, is that everyone within their own capabilities takes ownership of what they can in every given situation, and that means that whenever we run into a hurdle, it's never a blame game. Like, it's literally just never ever a blame game. It's a who finds the solution and how can we help each other find that. Because I don't think that Mac has Mac doesn't have an ego. Like, he doesn't have an ego when it comes to taking credit for anything. I think he's probably put me in the spotlight more times than he's put himself.
One thing I think is a bit of, like, I wouldn't say it's like misunderstood, but I'd say I think people have mischaracterized Max. I want to ask your take on this. I think ever since he did that whole thing where in his interviews, he would often stress that, like, I don't want to burn people out and I want people to, like, have time in the season, which I've always said was just a different way of phrasing. Well, actually, if people don't know, G2 used to do at the time. They also used to sort of work into this. But the difference is, because they said it in, like, a cocky, funny, like, lol, we don't even practice and everyone knew what they meant. But they always took for Mac that he was sort of like, they think it means he's, like, sort of not a winner, that he's, like, too kind, and he's sort of like, oh, you guys feeling bad? Just take the week off. Like, we'll get into it. It's what does he mean by that? What's his perspective? I see, like, it still feels like actually his teams are some of the best at peaking, and he does feel like he knows when to not abandon hope at week 2 if you're doing bad. So what do you think he meant by that? What vision did he mean by that?
I think, like, I share the same vision, so that's easy for me to share with you. I think what it really comes down to is understanding how to make a group of people work, whether it be players and coaching staff or coaching staff. And sometimes, in order for you to peak when you're supposed to peak, you go and play a round of football instead of doing 2 extra scrim games against BDS, who are playing Olaf anyway, unless you ban it 1, 2, 3 every game. And I think it obviously came off a bit wrong, maybe, because it was then followed up by an interview from Humanoid talking about how basically we didn't scrim at MSI, which
doesn't help. Okay,
which isn't true either. But I think one of our biggest takeaways from that year, and why we touched so much on burnout that particular year, was because we had a group of players that naturally didn't actually enjoy playing League of Legends that much together. And I think that when you have a group of people who doesn't enjoy playing League of Legends together, you have to be so much more mindful of burnout. Because, well, if you spend too much time around people that you don't like, or you don't like the way that they play the game, and for whatever reason, be it coaching staff or the individual player, you can't see eye to eye on how you want to execute League of Legends on not just a micro level, but also a macro one, then it becomes infinitely valuable to make sure that those players can coexist. And I think that was a big part of our job in 2021, was making sure that our roster could coexist with each other because there were so many clashing personalities and opinions on how to play League of Legends. And I think that sometimes that meant playing less and making sure that Max sort of paved the way through presentations together with me and Cass on how do we want to play League of Legends, taking examples from teams that everyone could agree were really good teams at the time, and sort of using that to bind everyone together.
I actually have I want to fire back on that a second, because I actually have my own perspective, which is it's often something I've found strange in the esports industry, which is everyone all the time on their social media posts about how they're all burned out and how, they need a break. And I've always thought it's weird because I don't get that feeling. But what I think I've realised over the years is it's because I get to pick what I do, though. So I'm always doing what I'm really into. I'm never sort of having someone make me go and do this for 4 hours. I think that probably would get really old. And then similarly, along these lines, another thing I had to learn, it took me a long time though, is there's a great quote I heard someone say where they said something like, there's no such thing as overworked, there's only underrested. And that actually blew my mind, because what I realized is that's actually what I had to learn in my own career was I actually grind harder now than I used to 5 years ago. But the difference is I also intentionally, I'm guessing this is something that you do with the bonding exercise, I intentionally also though schedule in specific time off though, as in it's not just I waste 3 hours on YouTube. I actually set aside a time to leave the house or go watch a movie, and I find that actually is so restorative. It's better than having an hour off work, if you know what I mean. So what would you say? I feel like this is something you're inferring as well. It's not just about the practice, it's about what we do that's when we're not practicing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think my sort of threshold for how much I can work now is 3-4 times bigger than when I joined Mad Lions. Because when I joined Mad Lions, sure, I was working really fucking hard. I was working to the point where by the end of 2021, I got physically ill watching League of Legends. I just couldn't watch the game anymore. And now I can put in the same hours or more hours than I did that year and feel fine throughout the entire year, because I have found out how to work within boundaries that keeps me excited, that makes me happy to do my work, and in periods of time where it makes sense, right? Because sometimes using 3 hours after scrim watching VODs is not the most efficient use of your time if you can do that 3 hours work in 1.5 if you do it next morning. So I definitely think figuring out sort of what burns you out and how to work in a way that keeps you excited, because I think sure, everyone on Twitter will tell you that we are playing, computer games for a living and we're just supposed to love it every fucking day. But that's not the reality of it when you're spending at least 70 hours a week watching League of Legends. If you don't find a way to do it nicely, if you don't find a way to do it in a way that you like to watch League of Legends, well, you're going to hate it at some point. So the more sort of effectively we can work towards pushing that limit away of, okay, I'm kind of sick and tired of watching League of Legends right now, so the better of a job we've done.
By the way, on that topic of the fact that, as you say, normally the reason why there is usually a little bit of friction or tension between the strategic coach and the head coach is because if the strategic coach does too good a job, one day the head coach knows they might just replace me with literally him. And so I can tell you, that's one area where not only I agree is that present within the industry, but if people don't even know, that's actually even still one of the biggest beefs players have. Some of my mates, Soaz and Amazing, they just straight up have said, I'm not going to train the guy who's going to replace me next split. It's one thing if you want me to play and then him to replace me. I'm not going to train him. That's one thing I've always been very impressed with Peter Dunn, but now Mac as well. It's it seems as you say about them not having a big ego, right? They must know that it's possible one day you could just have the gig instead of them, or one day they just choose to leave and it's your job, right? How are they able to be so giving? They never see you as a rival in any sense?
I think Mac definitely sees me as a rival, but in a very different way than the job stealing, backstabbing snake type of guy. I think honestly what Peter Dunn and Mac have managed to do so well over the span of their careers is create so much loyalty within the coaching staff. I am infinitely loyal to Mac, and if I ever wanted his job, his head coach job, I would tell him that I wanted to be a head coach now, and he would offer to become a general manager if that was an option, or I would go to another team.
Right.
Because that's sort of the respect that I have for this guy, because he gave me my entry to LEC. He's basically given me everything in terms of my coaching development so far. So for me to put myself in a position to backstab him or take his job or, throw him under the bus is just not something I personally would do. I can see that there might be personalities out there in the esports scene that would do it. But Mac would not be coaching those guys in the first place.
Give me a sense of this, right? Because one of the reasons I know that people aren't getting an accurate perspective, let's say, on people like Matt. Peter Dunn's a real ridiculous one, but I think that's more from talk shows, is when they hear them talk, they come off so friendly and nice, and they seem like they're the sort of guy that's like the substitute teacher, like they're never going to tell anyone off. But the reason I know that can't be true is because, one, if I know some of the players that these guys have won championships with, these are mad spicy players who don't mind criticising people, making fun of them, making jokes. Like, they're definitely not the people where it's like, they're just going to sit silently in the scrim room. So that implies to me there must be something behind the scenes where they can get buy-in from the player, they know how to talk to them. What has your perspective been like on this? Like, are you someone who, did this help you get buy-in with star players? What is their secret sauce behind the scenes? Because they can't just be like they are on camera all the time, can they?
I think there's two really big ingredients to that question. I think first one is something that Mac has struggled with in the past, but I think that he's developed so much on as a coach, is sort of establishing and maintaining a really, really, really high level of standards within a team. We try really hard to not push rules over our players, but get buy-in on standards and keep them to that standard throughout the entire year. Which is something that if you look back at our worst year, which would be 2022, is the year where we didn't manage to do that well at all.
By the way, can you just give an example? It could be like a generic one. What would be like an example of something you want people to buy into?
Okay, so something we want people to buy into and sort of like we have our cultural pillars right now is like we have 4 pillars. And the first one is be hungry, be humble. Like no matter how good you are, no matter how many MVP votes you get, I don't want you to hear you talk like down to your teammates or anyone else. Right. You need to stay humble and keep your fucking grind. Because like if you peak in spring and you're the MVP of spring, like no one cares. Like no one cares. Maybe you care, but if you care, then you're in the wrong mindset anyway. Then we have like obviously like don't be late, which like it might sound really self-explanatory, but there's so
pros
many
are notorious for being late, of course. Yeah,
so up late.
Yeah.
And then I think our biggest one, which has had the most success that we really learned from working with certain players on Mad Lions, is no moaning, no complaining, ever. Like, just no moaning, complaining, fucking ever. Because it's such a waste of time. When's the last time you sat in a game and you died to enemy jungler and you went, that it did anything good for the game?
Sure.
Like, not a single time. So I think getting people to sort of buy into that has honestly, it's decreased the amount of friction between the players, but also the amount of wasted time we've had of people, like being late, complaining instead of finding solutions. And I think that those are standards that will let us be a really, really, really good team, like now and in the future. And then I think the other points, the other sort of part of that question is, like Mac. The first thing Mac told me was that for me to keep this job was that I needed to be useful to the players. That's my first task. I need to be useful to the players. And he holds himself to an incredible high standard on that. Because like the second, like in any sequences where in the past that Mac hasn't felt like he's been useful to the players, he has always been his biggest critic, and he will take feedback on periods of time where, like, let's say he maybe put too much emphasis on delegating responsibilities, or too much emphasis on creating after action reports, or too much responsibilities on raising the level of the coaching staff rather than actually providing like new in-game material of how should we play League of Legends, like increasing or developing his vision of the game. And he keeps all of the coaching staff to such a high standard on this. Like he makes it very known that at no point do we know the secret recipe to League of Legends,
right?
Because it's a game that is in constant development. So the second that you start thinking, oh, I know League, that's when you start falling behind. And there's countless examples of coaches who they're just not around anymore because of similar stories of the game development sort of stopped developing, or game understanding stopped developing because they had figured out how League works. But League is too complex of a game with too many changes too often for you to have a fixed understanding of the game.
I have a few questions about last year's Mad Lions, mainly because I just did an interview with Carzzy, and it's actually hilarious because if people don't know, I don't even know him that well, but he just sort of is one of these people where it turned out for whatever reason, it's like I put the truth serum in him. He was just saying like all the blunt answers. So the problem is though, he didn't like expand on them, Pad. So here's a first question I have, which is, it's funny because I remember before the season began, when I heard all that drama behind the scenes, that like El Yoyo was basically supposed to be in G2 and like all the price was going to be agreed. But then for some weird reason, last minute, it all changed. And even though it was going to be like millions of dollars or whatever, like it didn't happen. And he ended up back in Mad. And I remember thinking like, oh, will this affect him? You know, like maybe he'll be like bombed out because he was supposed to win the championship in G2. And at the time though, because you guys made the finals and then the next split you won, everyone was like, no, I guess he's just a model pro, you know. That didn't affect him. It didn't bother him. Carzzy basically just says like, that definitely did. And like him and Nisky, that's real apparently. Like there was that friction. So can you give me some thoughts on this? Because I actually think to some degree, it's success of the coaching staff and the team in general that you were able to succeed in game despite these issues, right? Like it clearly wasn't a team where everyone loved everyone, right, Pad?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a team that didn't want to play together from day one. That much I can tell you. Like literally from day one of bootcamp, like it was a team that did not want to play together. And while I think that, you know, like we managed to sort of band-aid our way throughout the split and we managed to come second and then win the split and then go to Worlds, it really hit home for me in a way where I never wanted to be part of a project like that again. Because like, sure, I can win a championship on a team like that, but I've now won three LEC championships, and winning like domestically it's good. It's fun. Like I enjoy it a lot, right? It's nice, and you can sort of see like in the moments right after we won in spring, like my face compared to when we won in 2021 was just relief, because like that entire year was so stressful, and we spent so much time band-aiding that we actually never got to really develop the team towards new heights, towards actually being able to contest internationally, towards actually having individual players peak, because we had to do so much in order for Hyli and Yoyo to coexist, because their approach to the game, well, like to put it bluntly, I think it like Hyli wants to force enemy teams to make mistakes. Like that's his whole philosophy behind League of Legends. He wants to play in a way that forces enemy teams to make a mistake. While Yoyo is more content, not that he only wants to that, but he's more content allowing enemy teams to outplay themselves.
Right.
And I think that those two philosophies was something that Mac and I did a very decent job of sort of managing and helping those two to coexist within the games and officials. But it really took a big toll on our scrims, because so many of our scrims were completely useless practice. They were so bad because we spent much more time discussing philosophies post scrim games rather than the actual scrim game. So while I think that we did a good job, it really made me and Mac realize that we needed to escape projects like this in the future, because like for me as a coach, like I cannot, you know, end my career with 3 domestic titles and flopping out as early as possible in international. Like I need to go and first of all be good in international, and second of all win one. And you cannot do that on a team of players that doesn't want to play together. And our team, Nisky and Yoyo, did not want to play together at all.
Being from the stories I heard, I'm pretty sure some of these players never will play together again. Maybe you can give me some sense of what you actually were able to do, because the craziest story Carzzy told is probably that one of the winter split. He said in the winter split, you never won a single scrim block against any LEC team, but then made the finals, which is like, how is that possible? Because normally, Pat, it's the other way around. Normally the team's like, actually they're winning like 70% of scrims, and then they're like Army Corp, they can't win a game, you know. So I've never heard it the other way around, where you can never win a scrim, but then go to the final. How?
So it was actually the same story in 2021, where we won 2 championships. We were not winning. We were not winning scrims at all, but for different reasons. And I do believe that practice and scrims should be harder than stage games. Like ideally, scrim games are a lot harder than stage games,
sure.
And you just go on stage and you plug and play all of the things that you've done in scrims. So I think that scrims were we didn't win many scrims, and we certainly didn't win many scrims in winter. But I think honestly what it came down to is that we just had the best fucking stage players. Like Yo-Yo, when it matters, is really, really good on certain champions. Healy, whenever it matters, I think Healy is still. Is he still the player that like he never missed the playoffs? I think. Like I just think he never missed the playoffs. Niski, if he has a champion pool and we got Gragas, like we got a free champion that was the most insane champion for Niski, stylistically, right? Like a facilitating weak side trading tool that can absorb a lot of pressure while also like buying a lot of times and slowing down enemy team, and he can have like his signature bomber move. So I think honestly we did a good job of adding champions, and I think when it comes to playoffs, even though we were losing a lot of games, we were adding a lot of champions to our arsenal. And I think that for Spring Split that makes such a big difference, because if you look at Winter, by the time we reached finals, we were out of champions. Like we had been exposed on every single role. We did not have anything in our pocket. But I think we beat G2 3-1 in spring, and we didn't have to show anything. So by the time we played BDS in the finals, it was really free, because we still had like 3-4 champions that we hadn't shown, even though we were getting stumped on them in scrims. Our players were super confident pulling them out on stage.
Right, the obvious problem Mad Lions has had is, aside from 2021, where actually, the reason I even made a video about it on my YouTube channel, everyone's just deleted those international results where like the team almost was in the MSI final, like had to play the champion at Worlds, etc. But the problem is every other year, obviously there've been all these historic letdowns from Mad Lions, and they've been the team that's probably the most flamed, because all the Western fans are like, what the hell, it's just G2 only, who cares about this team? Right, my question to you was just this, obviously you're not on Mad Lions anymore, but my question is, how do you handle those sorts of things happening? Because they've happened a bunch of times, and I always feel like the worst thing in a game like League of Legends, I come from Counter-Strike, right, where if you do badly at one tournament, there's a tournament next month that you have a chance to get it back if you go. I always feel like the hard thing here must be you have to wait 6 months or even a year. I mean, with the old MSI format, you probably not even qualify to MSI, you just have to wait a year. Like, how do you handle having to wait so long to get a chance at redemption, as it were?
I think that's a really interesting question, because I think that's actually one of the big issues that I've run into as a coach in NEC so far, is that I don't think I've managed to be on a team that have gone to international tournaments and retained 4 out of 5 players.
Right.
And I think that has meant, for at least like for my history with like sort of like team cohesion and building rosters and sort of like stacking up or like prepping for the next international or leveling up. Yeah, I guess leveling up is the best word. It hasn't really existed, because when you change, like, let's say, like key parts of your rosters, you're a new team and you have to start from scratch in some way, shape or form. And I think from 2021 to 2022 we changed Humanoid and Carzzy, right? Humanoid and Carzzy, which were like, I don't know, like it was our goats. Like Humanoid was the goat at the time. He was the one. He was matching caps like every single split. He was having insane numbers every game. He was doing really well internationally, like laning phase versus all of the Asian players. And I think that that's something that really sits poorly with me now, is the fact that I have no idea like sort of what potential that roster had, because I never got to realize it. We never got to realize that because we couldn't retain the players, which is why now at Vitality, one thing that Mac and I have like agreed on really, really, really early is that we want to retain minimum 4 out of 5 players. Because that way you can keep building on of last year's experiences, and especially the international experiences. Because like, let's say we go towards this year, like Vito is going to need this because he's never been. Photon is going to need this because he's never been. Same for Linces. And if we then, like, let's say we let go of Vincent and Linces and fucking Photon, well, then we are back to scratch from next year. So I think it honestly comes down to making sure that you retain players and keep developing on top of like those established like learnings that you take away from international, because that's where you level up. You become so much better at internationals.
By the way, one thing I thought was just like a really curious piece of happenstance was when I talked to Carzzy, I just, as an analogy, because I like to give reference points so people get like the point I'm making as I'm making it. I tried to give him the reference point that, to me, if he's a fan of, because he said he was like a fan of watching like Asian ADCs, I was like, well, the obvious one you should be a huge fan of is Jackie Love, right? Because when I think of it, they have like the same career. They're like super skilled players who are really good in team fights, but they could enter the lane or just die randomly. And the joke is, he actually told me that literally that's what he was shown morning presentations was that player. And the reason why I think it's a great comparison is they've both actually, despite what people might think about its MSI, they've both sort of like plugged all the holes in their game. They already had the skill, but it's like now the floor of their game is crazier. So I think just like Rajcula, who doesn't int anymore, if people haven't watched for years, like Carzzy's actual flaw to it, like he's almost never a liability now. Like you remember what he was like back in the day, he would die on the midway of half the games, even if you wouldn't. So what was that approach like? Like it sounds like people very consciously tried to put certain examples in front of him.
Sure. I think like one mistake that a lot of teams do is one, either they don't go and learn from Asian teams who are currently just playing better League of Legends than the West is, and that's okay as long as you don't like announce them overlords and you'll never reach them, which might be a mentality for some players. But second of all, I think it's really important that when you do go and watch Asian teams or any team in general, that you choose teams that suit sort of your player style. Because, like, sure, we can go and watch T1 we can go and make 3 T1 presentations on their laning phase and on their natural setups and on the Drake approaches. Like, we can do that every year. But is Carzzy really the closest to Gumayusi out of all of the best ADCs in the world? Not in my opinion. I think if you want to get the best out of Carzzy, what you do is you go and show him how Elt works in BLG, how Jackie works in top esports, and you don't just make it about how Jackie plays League of Legends or how Elt plays League of Legends. It's how the team in relation to these players play League of Legends. How are they playing out skirmishes? How are they making sure that he's getting resources? How are they team fighting in a way that creates space for him to exist as an ADC? And how do we make sure that we help Carzzy play to the absolute fucking limit of flashing forwards and playing on edge and front stepping instead of sidestepping and sidestepping instead of backstepping, while also making sure that he allows his team to soak the skill shots that they're supposed to soak, to create the space that they're supposed to take, and to take the flashes so he can play more aggressive next team fight. And I think that that's something where, like, you show this to Carzzy and he picks it up in a day. But I think it's really important creating the context rather than just looking isolated at another ADC.
Yeah, and a point I'd like to expand on there is, as you say, it's obviously not even just the player alone. Like, the point is you can't do Jackie things if your team doesn't commit to you. I mean, I always thought actually last year's BLG really showed that. Like, they all played for that Elk guy in every team fight, man. That's like the dream if you're the ADC. So if people don't know, in the West, I actually think one of the problems we had, especially in LEC, was there was a lot of people who were sort of from the reckless school or the upset school where it's like they want to play the old school team fight and always be safe and be the guy on the kiting away. But it's like, that's not really ADC now, right?
No, I really don't think it is, and I don't think it's mid lane either. Like, I think this is something that, like, my goal is to dream impossible, similar to Peter Dunn. Like, he dreams of becoming a football manager. I dream of becoming a world champion, because I'm not done until then. And the only way for me to become a world champion is to sort of like go beyond the limits of that has currently been set by Western teams or Western coaching staff. And I think that, like, the old recipe of Reckless, it's not how any of the best ADC players are playing League of Legends anymore. And it's not how Faker is playing League of Legends in the mid lane anymore. And I guess more specifically Knight and Chovy as well. Like, so much of what we see from the best teams in the world right now is that, like, I think the best comparison I can make is how in previous time, you had this concept called cross map. Like, if enemy team is stronger than you or they have more tempo than you and they start the Drake, you cross map it. You just open 5 people on the other side of the map, you put position, and you try to hit top T1. I think that one thing where the game has really developed over the last 3-4 years is how you cross map and how much resources you invest into slowing enemy team down even when they're faster than you, right? So rather than just giving the Drake from free and going up top lane and sort of being like, okay, sure, we can trade 50-50 here, you put your support and your jungler to go and fuck with them or make them allocate more numbers to the objective and slowing them down on the back end of their play. And I think that extends into team fights where we really see someone like Carzzy be able to outperform the rest of the rest of the West, maybe except Hansama in a few games. Because he is so willing to not wait for that opportunity to auto-attack, but to create it himself by taking a step forward that allows an enemy team to throw a spell that can kill him. But he's prepping himself for it, so he's dodging that, and that's allowing him to deal more damage and be in a more aggressive position. And I think that whenever we recruit players now, like be it mid lane or ADC, like we are always choosing that player that take a step forward in order to create more opportunities than the player who waits for it to come to him.
I want to ask a question about Carzzy's personality, because I feel like it's actually really confusing. Because on the one hand, like, his Twitter persona is very different to his in-team persona, to his on-camera persona. Like, he's a different guy in all of them. So what I want to ask is this. It's strange that he's been on these teams that internationally have had so many failures. Because actually, one thing I kind of like about him is he does have that Caps quality where I don't think he's just being cocky. I think he actually believes he can play against, like, the Asian ADCs, and he should be better than the upsets and all the other. So I think he really does believe that. I don't think he's just trolling when he says that, right?
No, he really believes that, and I think that, like, Carzzy has developed so much as a human being since I met him in 2021. Because, like, at that time he was 17, just had turned 18. He was so young, and a lot of the players that we work with are very, very young, and a lot of the players we work with have also skipped out on high school and a lot of, like, sort of like social development for themselves. And I think that, honestly, Carzzy getting a few extra years among teammates, like, he has a really, really lovely girlfriend now who helps him a lot. He was in a bit of a toxic relationship before. I think that his growth as a person has made him such a better player. Like you said, like, the amount of times he dies on mid-waves now, like, randomly is near none. And I think it comes from like him developing as a human being. But when it comes to playing versus Asian teams, like, he believes he can go all the way. And it's up to me and Mac to make sure that we give him a chance to do that. Because so far, we have not had a good international. Well, MSI was pretty good. We almost took that one down. But outside of that, Carzzy definitely deserves to get a proper shot at taking a dump on some Asian ADCs.
Right, I want to ask about the current top laner of Team Vitality, who is Photon, obviously, because I feel like this is a player where people who only look, did the team win the game, will have a really different perspective on how good a player is. Because here's how I would describe him, Pat. He looks like the best top laner I've ever seen in lost games, if you know what I mean. Like, somehow, even if the game's lost, he, like, always seems to win lane or get, like, an edge in his matchup, or sometimes he's even up massively in lost. Like, one thing I find very impressive about that is the guy is from Korea, like an actual full-on Korean who's speaking second language English. He's in a different culture. I mean, in this particular team, it's not even like he has other Koreans. Like, how's he doing it? Like, this guy must have a very interesting perspective on League, that he's able to stay in all these matches and never seem to, like, tilt out or something.
I think Photon, in terms of the Asians I've met within LEC, has, like, the best level of English. Like, his English is so good. It's so good, to the point where now that he can make jokes in English. Like, that's not a very Korean thing to do, but his English level is really good, which means that it's really easy for him to take feedback. And one thing that he made a big goal for himself last year was to go and soak as much knowledge from Hyli as humanly possible. Like, the amount of hours those two spent together watching League of Legends together has been insane. Because similar to a lot of our players, like, Photon just have zero ego. Like, he's really good, and he knows he's good, but he's never gonna let that stop him from learning anything new. And I think that's been such a strength for him, is utilizing Hyli and utilizing coaching staff really, really well. And then obviously he has a lot of, like, mechanical prowess himself. He's a beast on, well, pretty much any champion. So I think him being able to do this well is, one, a testament to his hands. He has wonderful, wonderful, beautiful hands. But also how much efficient time he put into developing as a player last split. Because by the time that Mac and I arrived, he wasn't actually very well developed as a League player. So he just had good hands. But by the end of Spring Split, I'd say that his game understanding from top lane POV, especially moving into mid lane game, had, like, he's probably top 3 now, and I think he's going to be even better in summer.
Because he's a player where I'll use an analogy to explain to people why I actually think he's someone people should be more hyped about, especially now, hopefully, that the new jungler angle is going to make the team generally better. Because, like, there's a story, I don't know if you ever heard this one, that goes, I won't say what team or what year, but I'll keep it vague enough, like, it won't give away who it is, but people will know what I'm talking about. Right? A few years ago, for real, there was a European team that I know where, this story sounds mental now, but it's true, where what happened was the coach basically came to the players and was like, hey, I'm thinking of picking up this guy, and it literally was eventually T1's ears, but he wasn't T1's top laner on the main team yet. He was just like, I don't know if he was on the Challenger team or if he was just in like Challenger Korea or whatever. But the guy basically said, like, I've got this like amazing Korean top laner we can get. And like, I think I'll sign him. Like, he's sort of like the next top player. And this is no joke. His European players told him, like, why would he recruit this random Asian guy though? Like, we could just get, and then they said, like, look, like a good European top laner, but like just someone that like will never be a world champion, obviously, right? And so the obvious joke here is, well, now Zeus is the world champion. He's on T1, and now you can never get him now. Now he's never going to come to an LEC team. So I feel like Photon has to be a similar scenario, right? Like, people always say when it's the Asian player before they're really good, like, why are you signing this guy? Get the guy from the RLs. But like, when you look at someone like this, if you could unlock his potential, the talent there is like better than the majority of people you can get in Europe, right?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think so. I think when it comes to top lane especially, historically EU has suffered a lot from just being so mismatched at international events. And I think getting a player in, like getting pretty much any Korean in, like their work ethic, because of how the teaching system works in Korea, like basically in Korea, if you want to be anything, you have to perform really at a really high standard really early, because all of the school rankings are official. So if you want to be a good student, if you want to have a good job in Korea, you have to learn how to work really efficiently and really hard really early on. And I sort of think that culturally translates into how they practice League of Legends as well, to the point where with some players we have to tell them to play more and play like more with more deliberate practice, and with Photon we have to tell him to play slightly less. Right. And focus on things outside of the game, you know. And I think that's something that like gives him a massive advantage, because the amount of 1v1s he plays outside of scrim time just means that anytime he goes into any matchup that is currently meta or that he is playing, he's just going to be better. Like, at least that's how it's been for us so far.
And then also, from your perspective as a strategic coach, I imagine it must also be a game changer when you actually have a player who not only can play carry top laners, like he can actually win the lane. Like, you know what, Europe historically in the West is always just like, right, you're the weak side top. That's why my boy Adewamne has always had a job. I think you're just a weak side tank player, let the ADC and mid carry. But in your team, you can actually, like the Asian, you can play through top lane. Yeah, we can. And that's so scary for EU teams. It's also why Adam is as successful as he is, because whenever he gets one of his carry champions, like but you have to play League of Legends in a whole different way than Europe is used to. And I think that gives you so many advantages. So whenever Photon is in a good spot meta-wise and he has his counters lined up and we have made sure that they're ready for officials, I felt like we have been borderline impossible to draft against. Because last split they had to be scared of his TF, Cassante, and Jace for a whole split, and that's too many champions in top lane. Right.
Rumble.
Go on. Yeah.
No, just Rumble as well.
One of the problems that people have had over the years with Vethio is obviously each team he's been in has completely changed who he is as a player. Like on Misfits, he was that super late game player, but the point was at the time the game tools in the champions being picked allowed you to get to that point. Then people saw later, they obviously hated on him when he was in XL. Maybe he got his career back to some degree on Heretics, but like now in Vitality, it seems like he's a different player again. So like what I would ask is this, what do you think has either changed or what does he need to be the Vethio that can be an MVP type player and can carry the game? Because the skills are clearly there, but it seems like I would say compared to other players, he maybe seems like he needs certain things to feel more comfortable. He's not just a guy you chuck in a team and plug and play, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like on Vitality, I work as strategic coach, like in general, but I'm also Vito's positional coach and going to be Linsa's positional coach as well. And I think for Vito, he's probably had to change the most with working with me, because I just have really high standards for how I want mid laners to play League of Legends, and how I want them to practice. And I think some of like the biggest things for Vito has really been that you're right. Like he has the mechanics and the hands to be one of the greatest. But one of the things that he has missed severely in his history of play has been combining those mechanics with finding opportunities to apply them. I think that he has had a big history of not being able to apply damage in situations where he really needs to apply damage. And that's something that I have worked on a lot with him the last two splits, and that we are going to keep working with him on, is finding ways similar to what we talked about with Carzzy and Rajcula, right? Is making sure that we have a player that utilizes Hylissang really well, because Hilly will find an engage for you. We will find 10 engages for you. You just have to look at him. And having Vito in positions to deal damage in moments where it makes sense for him to deal damage and not be farming wolves or not be catching midwave has been a massive change for him, because he's been so used to sort of making sure that his resource upkeep is really high and then getting to those late game item power spikes. But I think with drops accelerating, like how much gold there is in the game, I think that as a player, you need to be a lot more versatile than being dependent on 3 item power spike in League of Legends. So if he can do that this split, he'll be a really, really good mid laner.
Right, this might sound like a weird question, but I actually do think if Hylissang wasn't called Hylissang, he would have been fired from a bunch of teams these last few years, just doing the exact same play. But if people don't know, the reason he doesn't get fired is he is Hylissang, though. So, like, the other side and what people know he's capable of, like, either buys him time, or I would say the more important thing, which I would shift the question to, is it feels like if a player did this from jungle or support and they weren't Hylissang, the reason you'd fire them is because you just think, like, I can get someone who doesn't do that. But it feels like every Hylissang team just learns, what do we have to do to play around this guy so that what looks like inting and bad play now actually becomes not inting and winning play, right? Give me a sense of this, because it feels like every team he has comes to this conclusion eventually. Like, essentially, you don't just tell him, like, ignore your instincts, don't go in. It's more like you have to find a way to make it so that it's a positive thing instead of a negative, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, that's exactly what it is. And sort of like when we got Hilly to Mad Lions in 2023, I remember both Mac and I being like genuinely surprised at Hilly's like understanding of communication or developed communication systems, because there were none. Like, there were none developed communication systems. And his ability to transfer knowledge to fellow players were abysmal. It was actually really, really, really bad. It could have been because like there were some personality like mismatches with him and Yo-Yo, for example. But honestly, when you have a player like Hilly, like my entire job as a coaching staff is to make sure that my team plays League of Legends in a way that doesn't remove him from his instincts, because his instincts are a reason why he's never missed playoffs, why he has won multiple championships, why he has been to a world finals. And while like that means I have a 2-part job with Hilly, I have to help develop his sort of like communication systems and his ability to transfer knowledge. But I also need to help educate my team in how we utilize the tools that Hilly brings to a team at the maximum capacity. And I think that when you have a player like Hilly, you're not going to do that in one split. Like, as you could see last split, sure, we got closer, but we're not going to do it in 2 splits either. So I imagine when you will see the best version of Vitality is when Lindsas, our new jungler, has had 3 splits with Hilly. By the time next summer, if we retain 4 players, I guarantee you that we will play League of Legends, Hilly League of Legends, and we'll be so good.
Right, one obvious question I have, since you've made this change in jungle, is that's another thing over the years I learned to look at when it's a Hylissang team, which is people act like either it supports like a one-on-one role, which it obviously isn't, or they act like it's just ADC and support, whereas I have to say for the last like 4 to 5 years, you have to look at the jungler and the support, and if they don't have a connection, especially if they can't communicate, you're going to have, especially if you've got Hylissang, you're going to have a lot of bad times. You're going to have times where everyone is just like, why is he going in? What the fuck? Like, I didn't even know that was possible. So the question now is this: since you've made the jungle change, is this something where like, is this like a heavy focus for Linkas coming in? Like, people are obviously expecting him to be like a talent himself, but it's going to be about how he can fit with people like Hylissang, right? If you want to enable this team.
For sure. Like, Lindsay's job coming into this team is taking charge of the early game and removing some of the communication responsibilities that Hilly has had like the last 2 splits.
Right.
And that's something that's well within like the bounds of Lindsay, something he's done on all of his teams. But outside of that, like initially for Lindsay, we just want him to come in and focus on himself and then watch and learn from Hilly. Because if he wants to coexist with Hilly, he needs to, of course, like he needs to be able to hear Hilly when he has good communication. He says, if enemy team does X, we will do Y. But what's really important is if he can see Hilly's League of Legends. And that's going to be a big part of his sort of development, the first couple of splits, is learning how to use those tools available to him, right? Because there's not very far from silly Hilly to mad scientist Hilly, you know? Like, it's very often whether or not you see the same the same information that he processes, because a lot of the calls that he's making or the plays that he's making is based off of such minute details of an enemy ADC or the mid wave clicking upwards instead of downwards, or using using a game-changing ability that has a 7-second cooldown, and that means that you can for sure win it 2v2. But like these things you're not going to see in split 1. So for Linseth is to come in and do what he's done on K-Corp and go before that and be a big voice in the early game. And then to make sure that Hilly and Linseth are going to be fucking remembered in EU as the greatest fucking duo of all time. They're going to have to be the next Un and Shun. They're going to have to be the next Kedia and Warner and Canyon. And, well, actually, Canyon is just the GOAT by himself. But that's what our aim is for those two.
Right, it actually just so coincidentally happens. I've actually always been a Liverpool fan, so I have a coaching-related question. Since obviously Klopp is leaving now, it's a topical time to ask you this. One thing I've actually been very impressed by in his career actually wasn't even just like strategical things or what player did he sign. It's actually that if you ever listen to him talk and his players talk, he seems to have one of the best buy-ins I've ever seen from any manager, especially because he isn't on like the Real Madrid where they can spend like $8 bazillion every year. Like he has to work with whoever he's got. And so what I wanted to ask you was this. In esports, a lot of people, I think, just LARP, as in they see something like what coaching is. Like they watch like Michael Jordan's The Last Dance, and they're like, oh, I'm going to take all things from this. And it's like, you can take some things from that, but it's not a guide, you know, like some of that's like high level stuff actually that you're not going to know as a bit. So what I would ask is this, Pat, I feel like a lot of coaches know the idea of like, right, they think buy-in is that thing where you all say in orgs, like, we're a family and, you know, we do everything together. And like, but the problem is, it's one thing to say that. It's another thing like Klopp to actually get the real buy-in and to get the player to listen to what you have to say or to want to do these and things. So what would you say are the things that you admire or you've taken from following essentially in your free time, someone who's done the coaching kind of gig I'm guessing you're interested in?
I think there's two really big things to, like, obviously I don't know Klopp personally, unfortunately. But from watching him from the sideline, there's two things, and one of them is game philosophy-wise. Like the fact that you have a team like Liverpool in a league like Premier League, which is like arguably the best league in the world, or at least the least top-heavy league in the world. The fact that his teams consistently over his entire stay in Premier League has run more than all of the other teams in Premier League every single year is a big testament to how he plays football, how he wants to play football. And that's something I take a lot of inspiration from, because like the whole concept of Gegenpress, which is how Liverpool plays football, of not allowing enemy teams to space, of forcing enemy teams to make a mistake, is exactly how I want to play League of Legends.
Right.
And that's something that, you know, like if you want to play League of Legends like that, the best guy in the league, well, that's Illy or Mickey X, all caps. Like those are the three players in EU that currently does this. No other players forces mistakes like those three do. The second thing in terms of getting buy-in from the players is, I think Klopp has such a magical talent of getting the absolute best out of all of the players and bringing in players that are underrated. He's not going and buying Cristiano Ronaldo or getting Mbappe. Like basically every time Mbappe has been linked to Liverpool, I've always known it's never going to happen.
Sure.
Like it's just never going to happen, because that's not how Klopp does it. So getting people and players who fit into your system of play and sort of drafting players based on that, I think is where I really take a lot of inspiration. And that's a big reason why Linseth is with us, because he ticks all of those boxes for how we see a future world champion play and act as a player. Yeah.
By the way, since you've mentioned in this interview, like obviously it's a grand goal, but it is the goal to be a world champion, right? If people watched MSI this time around, they should obviously see, especially from G2, that like it's not totally impossible. Like, look, it's not like the EU team's going to be the #1 favourite, but let's say they can be like a G2. Let's say it could be like the 5th or 6th best team in the world. Then it's possible you can have a dark horse win. I mean, I would say there's been times when like the 6th best Asian team won worlds before. I think like if you look at Samsung in 2017 or what, there's been times when there's been sort of the fluke win. DRX is obviously ridiculous, what they might not even have been top 6, mate. So I do agree. The mentality is it should be possible. But obviously the problem here, Pad, is like you alluded to with certain players, there are players who just don't believe it. Like, even if they say in interviews, like, I will clap Faker. I can tell you, like, I know these guys, when they do that 2-week boot camp and Faker claps them for 2 weeks, and then even worse than that, mate, not even Faker, some like Korean team who's like bottom of LCK who just gives you the script, when they clap you as well, then when you start the tournament, like, whether, even if you say that in your heart, you know it's not true. So my question for you is this: what is the challenge in actually getting players in the West to believe it's possible to clap Faker and to beat the T1s and the BLGs of the world? What's the challenge there, do you think?
I think you need a lot of time to make sure that you invest resources into drafting players that have this level of confidence, like self-belief. Because if you don't believe, like, it'll just never happen. There's like this great, like, there's this great analogy I always use for why I will always keep believing in the fact that I will win the world championship. And it's like, the 100 meters, it was the 100-meter sprint was basically above 10 seconds forever. Like for hundreds and hundreds of years, it was above 10 seconds. It was like thought to be impossible to break the 10-second mark. It was like, it couldn't be done. And then 1 year it did. And the same year it did, it was broken another 3 times. Right. And all it takes is one time. And I think back to, like, I just use history, like recent history of, you remember, like, sort of like the talk about China versus Korea was 5 years ago.
Oh, for sure, yeah. China would never be better than Korea. That was the premise, right?
It would never be better. And now you have JDG and BLG consistently threatening to take this throne again and again and again and again. And the thing is, if you work towards playing better League of Legends, not just in Europe, but you maintain a team that can go and get international experience. Because right now, if you look at EU, the players that we send to Worlds are very often not the same players. Like, sure, like Human has gone a bunch of time, but he's also been very outspoken in the fact that he's not particularly interested in, becoming a team captain or developing teams. And I think that, like, out of all of the players we have left in EU, the ones that has gone consistently are, I guess, Caps and Mickey X, and maybe Hansama is getting up there now as well, right? But we won't know how good EU can be until we start sending more players more consistently. And that's my job. Right. My job is to go with Vitality the next 3 years to Worlds and show that we can have, like, a steady level of progress over those 3 years. So by the time that we go again, we can go and clap some Asian teams. And I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I'm not going to convince, like, all of my players, but it's something that we specifically hire for as well, are people with a really, really high drive, but also a really high self-belief.
At the end of the interview, do you have a final message? Do you want to thank anyone or say hello to anyone?
Thank you for having me, and thank you to Mac, my tutor and head coach, for first of all, picking me up, but now helping me pursue my dream of becoming the best European team we've got. Like, he supports how we are building a roster. He involves me so much to the point where, like, I can see a future where my goals come through.
Manga tak.
Selv tak. Tusind tak.
In this esports world, it can seem like everyone's against you, but I've always got the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community, riding with me. And it is thanks to the support of the following people, this video and all of them on my channel are made possible. Matt, Pugnatio, Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Frisky, Tosh, Jensen Goh, Animosity, Torin, Tobias Bernasconi. If you've ever watched my videos, you know now I'm going to give a massive shout out to Jerky's Minion, the main man. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want teasers? Find out who the upcoming interview guests are. Maybe you want to ask me a question. I tend to answer them at length in my video AMA. Do you want to take part in one of those dinner discussions where we talk about what you're interested in esports? Well, if any of these perks or more appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skrilluminati today, where in the description box below is a Patreon link.